So as usual, we'll try to touch on a point or two on the Pasha of the week, and then try to find a parallel how it pertains, what it teaches us, and what kind of guidance it gives us. Surely you know the Pasha is Pasha C Toldos, and this is the Pasha that speaks essentially about Yitzchak. Yitzchak's life is described in the Torah very briefly. Avraham goes over several Pashas. Yankov goes till the end of the Chumash. Yitzchak is mentioned just a very brief section in the Torah in Pasha C Toldos. And clearly this is not because Yitzchak's life was short of accomplishment and activity, but rather Yitzchak's life was very unique amongst the Ovis, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yankov. Avraham started out amongst idol worshippers, and he went through the entire process personally to identify and recognize the truth, and then he had Hashem spoke to him and directed him, and Hashem lifted him up from idol worship to the highest levels, as we have discussed the other weeks. Yankov, also in contrast to Yitzchak, spent most of his life outside of Eretz Yisrael, even though he was born in Eretz Yisrael, in Yitzchak's home. But most of his life was spent outside of Eretz Yisrael. As you will learn in the next Pasha, at the end of this Pasha, you will see that Yankov has decided to run away from his brother Esau, and then he spent time in Choron, and then briefly back in Eretz Yisrael, and then the last 17 years of his life again in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. So Yankov's life also involved getting in contact with the whole world, completely outside of Kedusha. Yitzchak, on the other hand, as you already learned in Rashi, that Yitzchak was not permitted, and Chumash said, Tiferes says, don't leave Eretz Yisrael, even though there's a famine, you stay here. And Yitzchak's bracha came completely within the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. There was a famine, just like by Avraham. The Torah says, just like by Avraham. Avraham had to go away to a different land because the famine was too heavy to carry, to sustain. And Yitzchak was told by Hashem, you stay here. And despite the famine, despite the difficult period, Yitzchak flourished with enormous wealth. Completely different mode of an Avraham. And his avodah was entirely focused, so to speak, on Eretz Yisrael, within the realms of Kedusha. And this is why, in terms of mentioning the Torah, it's very briefly mentioned, because his avodah was very focused on Eretz Yisrael, as we will discuss a little bit later. Right in the beginning of this Pasha, there's an interesting pasuk, right? The first pasuk. All the Meforshim speak about it, and Rashi, including Rashi. The pasuk says, Eile Toldos Yitzchok ben Avraham. Avraham Heile des Yitzchok. It really is a totally odd pasuk. Not only is it repetitive, Yitzchok ben Avraham, Avraham Heile des Yitzchok. If he is the son of Avraham, then clearly Avraham gave birth to Yitzchok. But then it is putting it in a different context as well. When you speak about Yitzchok ben Avraham, you talk about Yitzchok. Yitzchok, the son of Avraham. When you talk about Avraham Heile des Yitzchok, you're talking about Avraham. Avraham gave birth to Yitzchok, so the focus is on Avraham. And the pasuk says, Toldos Yitzchok ben Avraham. What are the generations and the accomplishment of Yitzchok ben Avraham? Avraham Heile des Yitzchok. You're going back to Avraham? This clearly is in contrast to what it says in the previous parsha. Eile Toldos Yishmael ben Avraham. Over there also it says Yishmael is also called Yishmael ben Avraham. It doesn't say Avraham Heile des Yishmael. It says Eile Toldos Yishmael ben Avraham. So in that respect, Yitzchok is referred to similar to the Yishmael. Yishmael ben Avraham, Yitzchok ben Avraham. Except by Yitzchok there's an additional point, that Avraham Heile des Yitzchok. And people try to discuss the various points that this entails. The first thing, Rashi right away says that Avraham Heile des Yitzchok is implying, is referring to the fact that Hashem had changed Yitzchok's appearance.
Change Yitzchok's
appearance, looks. And he made him to be similar to Avraham. So cluster Polim Yitzchok, Daimali Avraham. He made Yitzchok look equal, similar to Avraham. Which means that originally Yitzchok did not look like Avraham, but because there were the cynics, as I said, it's Somei Hador, the cynics who came up and said, hey, are you sure Yitzchok is Ben Avraham? Look what happened. Yitzchok, Sarah did not give birth for all these years that she lived with Avraham. All of a sudden, she gave birth right after she came back from Avimelech. And they started making this kind of a view. So then the Rebbe, to counter these cynics, Hashem made Yitzchok, he changed Yitzchok's appearance, made Yitzchok look like Avraham. So then everybody was able to see, hey, Avraham made this Yitzchok. This is what Rashi says, basically. So our question is, the inyan that a son resembles his father is not a far-fetched thing, it's not an unnatural thing. It's natural that a son should resemble his father. Why did Yitzchok originally not resemble his father Avraham? And because of the cynics, the Rebbe changed, made them a whole big mess, changed Yitzchok's appearance. Why was it different to start with? It's natural that he should look like Avraham. So we will make certain points and then bring everything together. Number one, Yitzchak did not look like Avraham because Yitzchak's nature was actually quite different than that of Avraham. A person's face reflects his nefesh, reflects his nature, reflects his seichel. And Yitzchak's seichel, Yitzchak's nefesh, nature was totally different than that of Avraham. As it says in the Chassidus, in Kabbalah, that Avraham was Midas HaChesed, and Yitzchok was Midas HaGvura. Everybody knows what this is? Huh? Chesed and Gvura. Which are very different and opposite qualities, opposite natures. And that's why Yitzchok, in fact, did not resemble Avraham to start with. But then Hashem changed it, and he should actually, yes, resemble Avraham. Now, this itself brings up a very big question. Avraham had two sons. He had a son Yishmael, and he had a son Yitzchak. The fact that Yishmael was Avraham's son was absolutely without question. No question. Yishmael, in fact, did resemble Avraham. He was Avraham's son. It's natural that a son should resemble his father. Yitzchak, on the other hand, he did not resemble Avraham, and he had a totally different nature. It says in Kabbalah's funny that Yishmael had a similar midah like Avraham. Avraham was midas HaChesed, and so too was Yishmael, except that Avraham was midas HaChesed of Kedusha, and Yishmael was midas HaChesed of Klippa. But in terms of their midas, of their nature, they were similar. Yitzchak was the opposite of Avraham. Chesed and Gvura are opposite. It's water and fire. We'll discuss it a little bit later.
Did Yitzchak still, once he spoke to the guy, once Yitzchak spoke to Avram having chesed, did he also have with chesed and Gvura?
No, Yitzchak's midah was a Gvura.
Yeah, but then he changed, Hashem changed it after.
No, he changed that only the appearance. Yitzchak's avodah remained on the kav of Gvura. Didn't change his nature. While this is true, that Yishmael was closer, much closer to Avram's nature, so Yishmael's nature was much closer to that of Avram's nature than Yitzchak. And yet, we also know clearly that, as the Torah says, to Avram, "V'Yitzchak yikore l'cho zor," Hashem said to Avram, who is going to be called your son, not Yishmael, but Yitzchak. Yitzchak yikore l'cho zor. Okay, that's it needs an explanation. How is it that Yitzchak, who is so different than Avraham, and in fact he is the one who carries on Avraham's banner, and he is considered that he carries on Avraham's life. He is Avraham's son, not Ishmael. Similarly, so we'll come back to this. Similarly, the Pasuk says that Yitzchak was Ben Avraham, but Yitzchak is entirely different than Avraham in terms of his nature and in appearance. But, nevertheless, we have to know and recognize that Avraham hated Yitzchak, meaning to say that despite the fact that Yitzchak had a totally different nature than Avraham, who did Yitzchak relate to? Who did Yitzchak get his guidance from? Who did Yitzchak get his so to speak, parenting from, that he associated with, and he related to, and he said, this is my father, this is my guide, Avraham hated Yitzchak. Avraham is the one who created Yitzchak, even though he turned out to be totally different than Avram. In other words,
So it's still the same?
huh?
Still the same. Avram was ahead in somewhat.
No, good. In other words, this is the point, that Yitzchak had a totally different nature, a totally different path in Avodah than Avram. How did he get that different path? Why did he get this different path? He got it from Avram. Avram hated this Yitzchak. Avram was the most influential person in Yitzchak's life. And Yitzchak got his nature and his way to Avodah because of the influence of Avram. Avram hated this Yitzchak. That's the pshat in the pasuk. And now we need to focus in and try to understand how this is. How is that to be understood? As I mentioned before, that Yishmael and Avram had similar natures of chesed, except by Avram it was inside the kedusha, and Yishmael was inside the klipa, was including klipa. What is kedusha and what is klipa? Kedusha is focused entirely. Kedusha means that which is relating to Hashem. What is Hashem? Hashem is the creator, the source of all existence. This is not what appears, not the apparent, not the show, the chitzonius. This is the very soul, the very life of things. This is Hashem. Klipa is the opposite. Klipa is focused on appearance, on the chitzonius, on the world. So we say Yishmael was Avram's son, and he resembled Avram's nature entirely. Chesed. Why? Yishmael grew up in Avram's house. Let's take it in simple terms. And he saw Avram was a very successful person, very prestigious person, highly respected. So Yishmael said, I want to have that same respect. I want to have that same prestige. How do I get it? I act the same way as Avram acts. So I'll be part of his, so to speak, part of his school. I'll act the way Avram acts. So this is like a shortcut to Avram's accomplishments. The fact that Avram accomplished this through Avodas Hashem, by recognizing and being totally imbued by the Midas HaChesed, by Kedusha, by the Hashem's Midas HaChesed, Midas HaChesed. The reason, as we mentioned last time, the reason that Avram engaged in Chesed was not just to express his own kindness. Avram engaged in Avodas HaChesed because he recognized that Hashem reveals himself in the world in the form of Chesed. Kindness. Hashem bestows blessing, abundance of blessing in the world. So therefore Chesed will be a means to demonstrate and to alert people to Hashem's presence in the world. And this is how Avram engaged in Midas HaChesed. Like we said, we discussed it last week or 2 weeks ago, Avram would serve guests, would take guests in from the desert, wayfarers, would give them a comfortable, a pleasant meal and serve them and so forth. And then he said, okay, recognize what this chesed represents. Thank Hashem for it. Because you should know that all this kindness in the world exists because of Hashem's kindness. This is the source of Avram's kindness. Yishmael, on the other hand, had a totally different attitude, totally different mindset. His kindness, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya in the first Vedic, his kindness was to reflect his goodness. He saw from Avraham, people respect Avraham, right? Kindness looks good. So it looks good. That's the path of life that I'm going to adapt. Didn't have he didn't have that insight and that connection to Hashem, to the truth of the kindness, the essence, where it's coming from. He was interested in the chitzonis, in the klipa aspect. So he quickly adapted a lifestyle, emulating. You know what emulating means? Emulating, everybody knows, emulating means copying. Copying Avraham. And he was perfectly satisfied with just copying Avraham. Despite the fact that what it meant to Avraham, what it meant to him is totally different things. We have a similar thing in Pasuk Hayeo 2 weeks ago. Where the Malachim came to Sdoim. And Sdoim was notorious in their rejection of wayfarers, of guests. It was a crime in Sdoim to invite a guest into your home. Lot invited the Malachim to his home. So Rashi says, where did Lot come to this guy? Lot lived, he chose to live among Sdoim. He left Avram and says, I don't mind Sdoim, I can join them. Right? He moved away from Avram to live in Sdoim. Where did Lot get this type of equality? So Rashi says that he learned it from Avram. He lived with Avram many years. He learned from Avram to invite guests. This was not something of his own. This was nothing that he worked through in his own mind, in his own heart, in his own soul, to find this is the right thing, this is the truth. It's something that he was copying. And why was he copying it? It's prestigious, it looks good, it looks nice. That's like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, right in the same, at the end of the first page. That all the good that Tumas Olam do is liyisyahir, to beautify themselves. He does nice thing, it's a good thing, but he doesn't have the goodness, and he can't relate to the goodness per se. Because goodness, to relate to goodness, you have to relate to the creator of the goodness, the source, the God. But he doesn't relate to that, he relates to himself. So therefore, this was like emulating it. This is why Yishmael easily followed in Avram's footsteps in this respect. And Yishmael was very similar to Avram. Yitzchak, on the other hand, the Torah says Avram hoiled is Yitzchak. Avram was the most influential person in Yitzchak's life. He gave birth to Yitzchak. What does that mean, he gave birth? Giving birth means there's a child is born, and the child is born to be totally a separate, independent person. He has his own soul, he has his own mind and heart, and he has his own direct connection to Hashem. That's what giving birth means. It's really a miracle. It truly is one of the greatest miracles that we witness on a constant basis. We don't realize it. We don't pay attention to it because we take it for granted. It's a natural phenomenon. But it's a miracle of all miracles that a human being can create another human being to be completely, totally independent. Stand on his own and have his own neshama and his own, a full world, a complete world, created by another human being. Truly, he is only a partner in it. Hashem gives him the neshama, but this is one of the great miracles, one of the great testimonials of Hashem's presence in the world. There's a whole creation, a whole world created on a constant basis. So when Avraham hated this Yitzchok, Avraham gave birth to Yitzchok, means that he created a complete world. And this world is called Yitzchok, with a different nature than Avraham's. In what way is he related to Avraham? Avraham hated this Yitzchok. In the sense that just as Avraham related all of his activities, all of his pathways and identification was all due to the fact that he recognized that this is from Hashem, this is how Hashem reveals himself in the world. Yitzchok too related all of his qualities to Hashem. So Yitzchok was Midas HaGvura. This was not just because he preferred Gvura. Midas HaGvura because he recognized in Hashem the Yin HaGvura. Just as Avraham adapted, so to speak, to Midas HaChesed from Hashem, Yitzchok adapted to the Midas HaGvura from Hashem. Both of them related equally directly to Hashem. Yes.
I was wondering, you could see with Abraham opening up, his home for people, the Chesed, but how do you see Gabor and Yitzhak? Because he knew he was going to be slaughtered and he went anyway? Is that the only reason? I mean, that's a big reason, but I don't see any others in the story.
Okay. The Midas HaGvura of Yitzchok, it's explained in Hasidus that this is described in the Torah in the phenomenon that Yitzchok was engaged in digging wells. What's digging wells have to do with Gvura? Right? So, since you asked, I want to explain to you this whole thing. Chesed is the process where there is a kindness, means it comes that you get a revival, get an arousal, and get light from outside. You bestowed kindness. Kindness is something that you bestow. Gevura is a different process. Like a person, if we were talking examine, so to speak, a person's avodah. Chesed would mean you want to learn, come, I'll teach you. Gevura would mean, yes, I want to learn, but I want to find it on my own. I want to struggle with it. I want to dig through it. And really understand it and until I really find it on my own. I need certain guidelines, but I don't want to have a freebie. I want to struggle. There is a saying in the Rebbe Rashab, which I think is also in the Hayom Yom. So since you read Hayom Yom, throughout, you may remember this. But the Rebbe Rashab said that one can reach richer and greater heights when he is being led by someone else. He's being brought up. He can reach higher and greater heights. But it's much more significant if he works it out on his own. He finds it in himself. He digs into his soul, digs into his mind and heart, and he finds it and he works it out, then it is much more fundamental, much more powerful. This is Yitzchok and Abraham. Yitzchok was engaged in digging wells. This is some digging wells. What's the symbol of this? Digging wells. Water can come from the rain. This is a bracha from the Meibusher. Comes down. But Digging wells means saying there is water underneath this ground. Everywhere underground there is water. I'm going to find water in the dry land. Symbolically, what this means in terms of avodah and the person is what I explained to you. In every person has an neshama. There is two ways of reaching into that neshama. One is to be uplifted by an external influence, by chesed, by a teacher, by a Rabbi. Another is to face himself, to recognize himself, to be introspective and finding it in himself. As a matter of fact, this actually relates strongly to the union of Chassidus Chabad. You know that Chassidus, there was Chassidus, oh sorry?
I have a question.
Okay, let me just finish this, okay? Don't forget your question. The Chassidus started from the Baal Shem Tov. And then afterwards there was the next generation of the musician Maggid. For the musician Maggid, there were many outposts and many rebbes throughout Russia and Ukraine and Poland. And then there was a unique thing that the Alter Rebbe was very different than everybody else. And as a matter of fact, because of his difference, because of his uniqueness, there were many objections from his own colleagues because of his new way that he created. But they all recognized afterwards that this is a good way. What was it? The unique way, the Alter Rebbe. The others, their general approach was that the Rebbe is the tzaddik. And the Rebbe is the one who has all the insights and all the illuminations. And the Chassid gets, so to speak, warmed up by association with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe uplifts. The Chassid comes to the Rebbe for a Yom Tov. Chassid gets his inspiration and uplift, and this is what he lives with. The Alter Rebbe said, no, we have to find this in a different way. I'm going to teach him. And now he has to dig and learn and dig into his own mind, into his own heart, and find the inspiration. And Alter Rebbe gives him a whole prescription, order of things, how you get to that. First you learn, and then you misboinen, you heard of these words, right? You have to reflect on it, and then it comes into the heart, a whole process. And he says, I'm not doing it for you. I'm just going to show you the way, and you have to do it yourself. This is called Chassidus Chabad. The other Chassidus is called Chassidus Chagas. Chagas means, Chesed means the heart. That the Rebbe inspires directly to the heart. The Alter Rebbe says, no, I'm not inspiring directly. I'm going to teach him to his mind, and then let him work with his mind to inspire his heart. This was a profound difference with Avraham and Yitzchak. Avraham's way to influence the world was through chesed, and Yitzchak was through demanding work, demanding that people should reflect in their own minds, reflect in their own hearts, and influence themselves. He's going to teach, but they have to work on their own. And on himself also he applied the same formula. That's why Yitzchak stayed put. He didn't go around the world. He stayed put in one place. And he dug deeper and deeper and deeper into himself, into his soul. And it's symbolized in the Torah by the story with the wells. Okay? Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand, and then I mean, if that's the case, that the whole mission is we're supposed to work on ourselves, then how come that we're supposed to adopt and go, when we're supposed to have a mashpia that help us?
Sure.
That if it's us who are doing the work,
It
we're
was-
supposed to just learn inside the books and then
No,
get
no,
ourselves
no.
inspired.
You have to get yourself inspired, but you have to get yourself inspired correctly. So you have to have the correct interpretation of what you're learning. And then the mashpia will give you guidance how you inspire yourself, how you think about it, how you understand
Yeah,
this
but he's
thing
giving you
personally.
guidance. He's giving you guidance. But we're saying here that it's not through guidance, that it's through your own.
No, guidance is no problem. Inspiration and guidance are not the same thing.
I mean, what, people weren't inspired by the Rebbe? I mean, inspiration is different. I'm trying to understand.
What was, people were inspired by the Rebbe to do what?
To do more things,
To go out into no man's land and create an environment, create a new country. Can you base that on the Rebbe, or you have to have your own chayas, your own power to do that?
It's the Rebbe. It's the Rebbe giving you the power.
The Rebbe is giving you the power. That's true. The Rebbe is giving the power and the bracha, but you have to know yourself. When you stand up and talk and teach, you have to know what you're teaching. You can't just say, I just come from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe is a great man.
No, you don't
Right?
do that.
Every one of the shluchim is working very hard on himself to keep himself alive and to give life and inspiration to others. It doesn't work with others. This is why Chabad Chassidim have that capability to go out into the world, and others that they don't have it, because they don't have their own source of inspiration.
But they're inspired by. Originally, they got.
They're guided. The Rebbe tells them, this
the
is
first
what...
push is by the Rebbe.
Yeah, this is that's right. Sure, of course you have to have a teacher. There's no question about it. But the question is, what does it mean you have to teach it? You know, in most communities, you have to have a Rebbe and a teacher, whatever it is. And what happens? Everybody settles around the teacher, around the Rebbe. That's where they live. Here, it's a different story. You have a teacher, you stay in the yeshiva up to a certain point, and then you're told, now you go across the world someplace and start building a new world. That you cannot, that you have to have absorbed your own inspiration, have your own insights. You have to be a full-fledged individual. Haley, you have to have been born into a full-fledged, a full person.
Yeah, back to the statement that Yitzchak is the matter of character trait of Gvura. Before we would go into back to the origin of the different nature of Hagas Hasidim and Chabad Hasidim and their philosophy. We do have the clear-cut description how, from the Chumash, how Yitzchak went on to continue digging further wells. And since you underlined that Yitzchak's activity and the Gvura was expressed by the Avodas Atzmi, so this statement requires a reminder on the fact that Yitzchak's first two attempts to drill well had been destroyed by the Arabs, and it forced him to continue on his way. And this fact actually seems to contradict with the statement that it's a matter of Avodas Atzmi.
Why?
Because he was forced to stop and continue another place.
Yeah, so. But he continued another place on his own.
Okay.
Sure. You also had a question. You don't have a question.
No.
I thought you said it. Okay, let's get back on target over here. So, the similarity and the continuity from Avram to Yitzchok, instead of Avram, Hoylidus Yitzchok, is a statement that says that no matter where Yitzchok goes, no matter how Yitzchok develops in his own avodah, it is Avram who set the principle behind Yitzchok's avodah. Why? Because Avram gave Yitzchok the principle. And what is the principle? Avodas Hashem. Not like Ishmael, who picked up from Avram the chitzonius, the appearance of avodah, just emulating and copying. The chitzonius, that's a quick fix. This has become, so to speak, a cultural thing. Yitzchak did not follow culturally Avram. He followed Avram in principle. And this was so true that actually Yitzchok did not even look like Avram. It was not natural that Yitzchok should not look like Avram. He was Avram's son. But he didn't look like Avram because he had a different quality, different nature, and different mode of avodah. And the fact that he turned out to look like Abraham, this was a miracle for the Mevash, just to do away with the tinus, with the cynics of the generation, of the time. But essentially, Yitzchok had his own path in Avodah. Where did he draw it from? He drew it from Abraham. Because it was all drawn on the principle of Mesiras Nefesh, of Avodas Hashem. So we can speak a bit briefly in the same vein, because I want to go back and speaking about ourselves, but just to show how this is a pattern that repeats itself. That later on, Yankov and Esau, who were twins, they were Yitzchak's sons. And they both grew up in Yitzchak's house. There too, we have the same paradox. Paradox. There too, we have the same question. Yitzchak was Midas HaGvura, and Esau was Midas HaGvura. What was Esau's bracha that Yitzchak gave him? Al char b'chotichya. You live by your sword. With the power of the sword. Yankov, Ishtom, Yeshiv Yeholim. Yankov's avodah was totally different than that of Yitzchak. Yitzchak stayed put in Eretz Yisrael. Yankov, as we said before, was almost most of his life was outside of Eretz Yisrael. He worked for Lavan. He had to deal with Lavan, and to deal with all kinds of treachery, all kinds of things that he had to deal with. With Lavan and with Esau. He was in Golus, which Yitzchak had nothing to do with. When it came to get married, Avram sent a servant to bring a wife for Yitzchak. Yitzchak told Yankov, you go and get yourself a wife. Outside. Totally different path of life. Yankov was mamish involved deeply in the world. And it says, see this, that Yankov's nido, so to speak, the mode of Avodas Hashem was what's called Tiferes and Rachamim. Different than Avram and different than Yitzchak. Chesed and Gvura, and Yankov was Tiferes, or Rachamim. Completely different nature. Different path of it. And yet, I'm sorry?
Does that mean Tiferes? Compassion?
First beauty.
Compassion. In this, properly would require a broad discussion. Simply, it's put is like this: Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes is as follows. Chesed is kindness. Kindness means, effectively, if you are in need, then I cannot resist but to help you, but to give you what you need. Gevura says, if you're in need is not sufficient. You have to show me that you are going in the right path and you're doing the right thing, that you deserve to be helped. That's Gevura. That you're doing everything on your own, and then you need a help, I'll help you. That's Gevura. Tiferes is a combination, is a compromise between the two. Where it is not like Chesed that is completely open to anyone who comes, gets. You have to judge, does he really need it and so forth. But on the other hand, you're not going to be demanding, strictly demanding that he should be perfect. As long as he's going to use your help in the proper way, you give it to him. That's basically a very general overview of the three needs of Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes.
So which one's a better way of going with things?
One second. You know what? I'm going to go back to your question because I don't want to deviate. I'm going to ask this question, okay? Excuse me? So there too we have like this. We have Esav and Yaakov, Yitzchak's sons. In nature-wise, Esav resembled Yitzchak much more closely than Yaakov did. And as we find it, the odd thing is, we find in the Torah says, Vayehav Yitzchak es Esav. Yitzchak actually favored Esav over Yaakov. Right? That's what it says in the Parsha. How this came about, but the point is, Yitzchak favored Esav. They were closer in nature, huh?
Because he didn't have eyes to be able to see what Esau was even doing.
Well, that was much later.
Oh, so he saw what he was all about.
Eventually he found out. But in the beginning, it wasn't because of his eyes, because when he lost his eyesight, was much more later.
So Esau was already doing his bad ways when he lost his eyesight.
Right.
So when Yitzchak had eyesight, he was able to see what Esau was doing. So that has nothing to do with the fact
But Esau was able to mislead Yitzchak. How he was able to do that is a question, but nevertheless there was this phenomenon that he was able to mislead. And Rashi brings down this is Esau's approach. He knew that Yitzchak's nature is Gevura. Gevura means precision. Digging into a very precise point and demanding. So Esau came up with questions, halakhic questions, of such precision that most people don't even think about. Like he asked, how do you take meiser from straw? Salt. How do you give meiser from straw and salt? What was the point of this? There's a whole sikha from Rabbi about this, a very rich sikha, but just a quick. Esau wanted to impress Yitzchak that he too had that quality. That he was very demanding. He wanted to know exactly how do you take meiser from straw and salt, which are things which you can hardly think in terms of meiser. What is this meiser about? Meiser you have to take on the produce of a year. Salt does not produced on a yearly basis. So Esau resembled Yitzchak in his nature. Yaakov was totally dissimilar from Yitzchak. And yet, who is truly Yitzchak's son, who carried on Yitzchak's, so to speak, path in life and legacy, was Yankov. It's not this. And Abraham, Yitzchak, Yankov, despite the fact that each one of them was different than the other, together they formed the so to speak, the tripod of that maintains the Jewish people throughout the thousands of years. This is the solid base for the Jewish people, all three of them together. So there again we have the similar phenomenon repeating itself. That what in fact was, in what way did Yankov carry on, so to speak, represent Yitzchak and met Esau? Not that he emulated Yitzchak. He didn't emulate Yitzchak at all. His way of life was totally different than that of Yitzchak in every aspect. Yitzchak had one wife, Rivka. Even though for 20 years they didn't have children, there was no suggestion that Yitzchak should take a second wife like Abraham did. No suggestion. It was completely out of Yitzchak's will. Yankov had 4 wives to build his nation. Totally different. And yet, Yankov is the one who carries on the banner of Yitzchak. Why? Because the banner of Yitzchak, the banner of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yankov, is not what they look like and how they act. In other words, in what form, in what meter. It is what the principle of their lives is. What is the soul of their activity? Why do I do anything? Why do I do kindness? Why am I precise? Why am I demanding? And in that respect, it's one threat. Totally one threat. All 3 of them were 100% engulfed and dedicated and bottled to Hashem. All 3 of them was called Merkava. They all represented God's presence in the world. They didn't know anything else. Nothing else. Their lives was completely permeated with a godly presence. And now we'll take a moment and speak about, see how this reflects by each one of us. We all learn from each other. Human beings, by nature, do not seek solidarity, to be alone. Solidarity, yes, not solidarity. The Rambam says it's natural for people to live in groups, social groups. A person who is so to speak, a nomad, cannot associate with other people, this is not normal. The normal thing in people is that you tend to be involved and interact, and you learn from one another. So it is important. Even if you see, certainly you have to judge what you're going to learn from one another. A good quality, or you have to judge what you learn. You don't just pick up anything. Just because they are doing this, the Rambam says if a person lives in a society, it's the Rambam, who first says that a person cannot live alone. But he says if a person lives in a society that has strayed off the path, of the godly path, then he is obligated to leave, and even if it means to go and live and enter social life outside of society completely. Even though it's totally unnatural. Because he is by nature going to be influenced by his environment. And any influence that tears him away from Hashem it cannot be justified. In other words, the primary path in a person's life is that which comes through his soul, through his neshama, through his emunah. This is something which he cannot deviate. This is the pure thread of life. Then we observe and we absorb different qualities from one another. But we do not, so to speak, just plain emulate and copy. We learn from one another because we see, this represents godly quality, this is good. And if it is not good, then we have nothing to do with it. Because our dedication is to that thread of life, not to an external action. This is an important principle in life in general, and particularly once a person had set up his life, more or less he follows in the path, particularly during the time when he is first formulating his path, finding his way. And it is very easy to be swayed, what is everybody else doing? So, while it is important to join in and actually be part, so to speak, of the group, at the same time, it is primarily the primary thing, a point of importance, is that one has to identify and find his own soul. Find his own life. And then, based on that soul, based on that emunah, based on that insight, he can learn all kinds of qualities, all kinds of modes and means how you do things. And we can learn one from the other. All too often, a person, they don't realize this principle. So we are like a leaf in the wind. Whatever something, whichever direction the wind blows, that's the way we go. This is not for a human being. A human being is not a leaf in the wind. A human being has his own, like I said, Avram, Hoili des Yitzchak. He gave birth to Yitzchak. Every human being, every Yid, has his own neshama. Which means, like the Alter Rebbe insists, everybody has seichel, everybody is able to understand and to know Hashem. Different levels, but everybody has a knowledge of Hashem. That's the first thing. And he has to dedicate and recognize that his life, his path in life, has to do with this connection, with this purpose in life. To maintain this connection and to reveal and to develop this connection. And thus, this is like the anchor. This is what keeps him online in a straight path. Then, of course, he has to learn. We learn from one another, all kinds of different midos, all kinds of qualities, and we train ourselves, create good habits and so forth. But all of that is not just to emulate and to look good and to fit in. This is not our thing. Our thing is not to fit in. Even while we're in yeshiva and everybody has to live together and so forth, yes, you have to do what is demanded of you in yeshiva. But at the same time, we have to also have a sense of what it is that we do. Not just to fit in. Because if we're just going to be fitting in, then we are not really absorbing anything. We're not getting anything. While we're being pushed to do the right thing, we do the right thing. But what happens when we're not pushed? Then all we have is the habit. We don't have the real insight. We don't have a real anchor in life. real anchor in life is our insight, is our connection to our own soul. Hashem has given every individual person a full arsenal of all the qualities a human being needs to conceptualize and to understand and to guide himself in life. From the Chokhmah, Bina, Vadas, and in the Midas, and in the action. And to bypass this path, just, it could be a lazy streak, or it could be too difficult, whatever it is, to bypass this thing, no, I'm just going to do it because everybody else is doing it this way. This is a prescription for losing oneself. Not knowing where one is. And sometimes, this one, sometimes, the guy on my left is pushing me this way, the guy on my right is pushing me this way. I don't know what to do. I'm at a loss. A human being is supposed to stand on his own 2 feet. At all times. That way he's an Oved Hashem. And then, of course, he's going to be accommodating and understanding and learning from each other. No question about it. There is an interesting phenomenon. That fish are considered part of the water. Fish, it's a living entity, right? A living animal. Are of the same temperature as the water which they swim. Do you realize that? It's an interesting thing. If they swim in water that is below freezing, they will be below freezing. However they survive. Fish have the same temperature as the water. The water is 40 degrees. That's their temperature. A human being, at all times, maintains the same temperature. In the winter, when the air temperature is below freezing, that's human body changes temperature. Exactly the same. Hashem, if it becomes normally it should be a 98. If it goes down to 96, you're sick. You're not capable of doing anything. Just 2 degrees below normal. And the same thing the other way. If you have 100 temperature, 100 degrees, 101 degrees, your mom is sick. That's so terrible. A human being is Avram Hoylides Yitzchak. He is a complete world. Physically and, more importantly, spiritually. And everything that he absorbs with his seichel. He learns, he thinks, he reflects, and he gets to relate to it. That way, once he identifies this is right, nothing can shake him. This is the truth. I believe in this, that nothing can shake him. This is very important for us here. Just one nakuda. We go to 770, we go to Crown Heights, and we hear all kinds of things. And the man comes back and says, I came by hearing about children. I thought that religious people are all the purest. They never do anything wrong. I can't even imagine that they can do something wrong. They have a Torah, they believe in God. And then on top of it, you have Hasidim, whatever it is, and you start hearing all kinds of things. So this, Shalom, in sometime, if a person relates to the truth on the basis of his social relationships, he gets all shaken up. Gets all shaken up. Who do I follow? This one's like this. The whole world is come to an end. This is why we learn. We learn from the proper teachers, from the proper sforim, and we know what the truth is. The fact that human beings are fallible and can make mistakes doesn't shake me. I'm disappointed, but it doesn't shake my faith, my view. It's not a reflection on the Torah. It's not a reflection on the Meibush. It's not a reflection on the Jewish people. It's not a reflection on the Jewish soul. It's not a reflection on anything. It's a reflection on the weakness of this particular individual. And yes, indeed, every individual has weaknesses. Just like I have weaknesses, I believe that other people have weaknesses. But what do I stand on? Not on other people, I stand on my own feet. That has to be the principle of a person's life. This way, everything that you acquire, every little knowledge that you acquire is yours. It gives you a little insight, a little strength to follow through. It's not a temporary thing. Oh, I'm now together with these guys. They think like this, so I think like this. Oh, these guys, they think like this, I think like this. It doesn't lead you anyplace. That's a futile and meaningless knowledge. When you learn Chassidus and you see the truth of Torah, the truth of Chassidus, that is your guide. The fact that not all people live up to its principles doesn't change the truth of Chassidus. Doesn't touch it. So the Rebbe should help each one of us to get an insight, to be able to be in touch with oneself. To be in touch with oneself means to be in touch with one's emunah, with one's soul, to whatever degree, whatever depth. But know that you're a human being and that you have a soul and you have an intellect, and you are able to understand and to have a sense and to be in touch with your own reality. So let's hope this will give us all strength to carry through our task of here in Yeshiva and Mr. Shem beyond.